Okay, good morning. My name's James Stanger. I'm an embryologist with more than 50 years experience. And on this video, I'd like to talk about egg donation. It starts with an article I found in the Sydney Morning Herald, Monday, the 6th of October, 2025, published by a reporter called Hannah Bambra, who is a writer, peer support worker, and sexual reproductive health advocate. This is an article which I'm going to read verbatim, and then at the end I'll make some comments about egg freezing, egg donation, and the issues. So I assume I'm allowed to do this, but it's an article which is behind the Sydney Morning Herald paywall. But I bought the paper, so I'm going to read it. Nearly 3 years ago, the author wrote, I took my fertility into my own hands at 31 and began IVF by myself. Freezing my eggs while I was not in a relationship felt empowering. It helped me feel as though I wasn't working to someone else's timeline. One of the earliest questions I had to consider after beginning the process was what I wanted to do in the event of having an excess of eggs. That is, if the retrieval was so successful that even after using the number of eggs required to start a family, there might be some left over. In Australia, there are 3 options for surplus eggs and embryos: destroy them, donate them to science, or donate them to another person or couple. While there is a lot of talk about low supplies of donor sperm in Australia, we also have a critical shortage of donor eggs. And because egg retrieval is so invasive, expensive, and protracted, supply remains low. For people who need donor eggs, this is an understandably devastating reality, and donating excess eggs could be a solution for helping those with this issue. And yet, when it came time to decide what I wanted to do, I found myself having unexpected feelings about donation. In many ways, giving my eggs to someone on a long waiting list so they can start their own family feels like the ultimate gift. But at the same time, it feels like a weighty and complicated decision. In New South Wales, if a donor-conceived child is born after January 1st, 2010, they can access identifying information about the donor from a government-controlled central register when they turn 18. While many donors-conceived people felt they were finally getting the missing piece of the puzzle for their genetic history, some donors felt that they had been misled and that the legal change went against their wishes and for the context of their donation. Perhaps unsurprisingly, there has been an added strain on the shortage of sperm and eggs since anonymity was removed and online DNA testing became more common. A Deakin University study in 2021 on the question of why donor-conceived people wanted to meet their donor parents found that most viewed it as a way of expanding their identity. While this makes sense to me, the idea of a donor being a parent is at odds with many of my personal beliefs. I'm pro-choice. I do not think life begins at conception, and because people are not eggs and sperm, I really don't believe simply donating my biological matter makes me a parent in any real sense of the word. The idea of being the missing part of someone's puzzle is also a terrifying prospect for me. If I hadn't raised them, what could I possibly have to offer them? And why couldn't that contact be partially my decision? While many want the choice, the desire for a relationship with the donor is not universal. For those who do reach out, some say it is because they want to know where certain traits come from and what characteristics they might be able to attribute to their donor. It's testing nature versus nurture debate. While research showed that the donor-conceived people can have different expectations about the importance of genetics and what role a biological link can play in shaping them, who are they, or who can they be compared with donors? The decision to contact a donor is surely a difficult one for parents and their child. But as a potential donor, the weight of expectation also feels heavy. Why would I navigate someone else's search for answers? What if they expected something different from what I was able to provide? Zoe Nico, who's mentioned in the article, who has embryos in storage after the birth of their first child, tells me she thinks about this conundrum all the time. As I started thinking more about baby number 2, I find myself thinking about my 5 little frozen embryos, she says. At some point, if they do have a successful second pregnancy, Nico will need to decide if she wants to keep the remaining embryos, destroy them, or donate them. At one point, I was I was leading towards altruistic donation, but now I'm not so sure, she says. What freaks me out is the control of outcomes you relinquish when you donate your embryos over the environment they grow up in and who raises the child. Going into a clinic with the intent of having your own family is an all-consuming focus. What will happen after that is achieved is often an afterthought. But with 1,500% rise in egg freezing in Australia in the past 10 years, the question of donating or destroying is only going to become more common. For now, I've ticked the box to donate any unused eggs to scientific research, which feels like a happy medium. But when I finally hold the child I've dreamed of, I might see the gift I've been given and compelled to pass on to someone else. I know the pain of waiting. Okay, I thought this was a good article, and it personifies many of the issues which are currently facing this huge number of people having eggs frozen. As in reality, having your eggs frozen, only about 10% of people will ever use them. The vast majority will never be used, and they may sit there for 5 or 10 years. I don't know that there's a waiting time for egg freezing. Certainly is for embryos at 10 years, but eggs I'm not so sure about. And I think clinics, if they treat more and more people who are older, will be wanting to achieve pregnancy using donor eggs, and they will be encouraging people who have their eggs frozen to donate them for other couples. So I think this is something which has to be thought out before you start, right from the very get-go. And you need to have a fair amount of counselling and thought. Having worked in IVF for 50 years and seen the concepts of using donor sperm by that time, I haven't really seen a major issue with sperm donation, sperm donors. My experience has been that most donors are happy to meet their children conceived through donation, but there's one caveat, and that is that they need to be open about their sperm donation with their partners and children. There's one case I know where a man donated his sperm to a brother but didn't tell his partner. And when those children were born, the partner was quite devastated that she wasn't aware of the other family conceived by her husband through donation. I think there's also a difference in donation between donating eggs and donating embryos. I think there will be a lot of pressure into donating, so I've just done a video for my YouTube channel on autologous advanced donor eggs conceived pregnancies for older women, and it's quite clear that using donor eggs, particularly for someone who's under 30, can produce some quite spectacular success. And going forward, as more and more older women are being treated, I can see clinics increasingly keen to access the huge pool of frozen oocytes, particularly if they're somewhere between 25 and 30, for treating infertile people. And I don't think there will be a huge issue about children conceived from those oocyte donation accessing the information. So I know that Hannah Barbary in her article talks about concern, but my experience has been after 50 years that I've never really come across in that time any adverse experience of sperm donors being contacted by their children. On the other hand, I haven't heard many examples of how successful it's been. I think it's just one of these things which is overstated. And donating a gamete is quite different to donating embryos. And I think at this point in time, I'd like to make a comment that donating embryos is a different kettle of fish. I've been involved in a couple of egg donations, and it's quite clear that it's something a bit different. When you have a child through IVF and you have frozen embryos from the same cohort, and you then think about donating those embryos, you suddenly realize that the embryo, when implanted, and if it results in a live birth, that child is a biological sibling of your own children. And even though it's been gestated in the womb of another lady, but legally, they are the legal father of the child or mother of the child. The reality is that your sons and daughters will have a sibling, and those ties are far stronger. I don't think there's been a lot of publications exploring the impacts of that, but my gut feeling is I think it's a difficult one. I know at Lingard, so where I worked, we had lots of surplus embryos and we thought about donating them, And most couples thought they were interested in doing that until they all had a session with our counsellor, and they realised that, in fact, that was the last thing they wanted. Our approach was the donation should be open, and the donors and the recipients should meet before the child is transferred. And when that happened, no one wanted to donate their embryo. So you may want to donate them anonymously. That might feel good. But if you then find that your children have a sibling somewhere else they don't know about it, I think that's an issue. So I'd like to stop there. I think this is a good article, and I hope that okay me reading it. And I'm sure that there will be hundreds of women in the same boat thinking about what to do with their donor eggs. And my comment would be, if you're concerned about it, just don't, just discard them. If you want to donate to research, I think that's perfectly wonderful. I think that's very admirable. Then donating it for someone else to conceive, particularly if you're under 30, then I also think that's a wonderful gift. And I don't see the people receiving that donor egg will see it in any way as people receiving donor sperm. And I think that's, to me, that sits fairly well with me. But donor embryos, I think that you'll be very careful about doing that. It's far better to keep the embryos in storage until your children go to school or you reach menopause, at which time my experience is most people are quite happy just to have them take them home and bury them in the garden, as it were. Okay, so that's my view. I hope this may be of value. If I can, if you like what I'm doing, press subscribe, press like, and tell other people about this service. Goodbye.